Welcome to this session on Don't Lose Credit for Your Research, where we will be looking at how to actively manage your research identities from the major citation services. What are researcher IDs? They're unique identifiers, usually a number, that is associated with a particular researcher or author. Why would you want to use research IDs? Well, the main reason is that when you publish lots of different research, you may find that there are other researchers out there with the same name as you, so your name might not be unique. So when people are looking for your research, they may get other research by other people with the same name, whereas with a researcher ID you will have a unique identifier to identify your research specifically. Also, names can change over time, and you can still associate various different versions of your name with one researcher ID. And often when you're publishing in a number of different publications, you will find that they're inconsistent in how they use your name. They may use different variations on your initials or your full name, and again you can associate all of these different versions with your unique researcher ID. This means that you can ensure all your publications are attached to your name, and that means that you get all of the credit for all of the times that your publications are cited, whereas if you were using different names in different publications, you may not be able to see all of your citations in one go. So a researcher ID gives you a much more accurate citation data, which allows you to have a more accurate H-index and look at other measures of impact. It also means that you can find your work more easily and others can find your work more easily, because once you've set up your researcher IDs, there's normally an option to click on them within the databases and see all of your publications in one place. Your researcher IDs will also stay with you throughout your career, so even if you change your name or change institution, you can take your researcher ID with you and it will still link all of your publications together across the whole of your career. At the University of Leicester, you can also use your researcher IDs to supplement or replace your search profile in IRIS, which means you will get a much more accurate publication profile within IRIS. There are 4 main researcher ID tools available at the moment. Those are the ones that are available through Web of Science, Scopus, Google Scholar, and a particular one called ORCID. So what we're going to do is look at each of these research ID tools in turn so that you can decide which ones are most appropriate for you to use. Within Web of Science, in order to set up your researcher ID, you will need to create a Web of Science account. So that's fairly easy. You just go to the sign in option, create a Web of Science account. Once you've created your Web of Science account, under My Tools, you will find the Researcher ID option. So when you go into your Researcher ID, it will look something like this, and it will give you the option to see which publications are associated with your name and add any that are missing or delete any that aren't you, that is someone else with a similar name. And once you've managed your list of publications to get it correct for the publications that are available in Web of Science, you will then see your researcher ID in the top corner, and you can also do things like look at your citation metrics to see who has cited your work within Web of Science. For example, these are my citation metrics, and as you can see, it shows when my publications have been cited by year, and it also gives me my H-index within Web of Science over on the right hand side. If you're not sure what a H-index is, then see one of our other videos that tells you more about this. If you want to look at your researcher ID in Scopus, it's actually called your author ID rather than your research ID. So you would need to go onto the Scopus database, click on the author search, and do a search based on your surname, initial, and you can also add the University of Leicester in to narrow the search down. Once you've done your author search, you will then see a list of names that match the search that you've put in. If your name comes up several times, you can request to merge those author names together by clicking on the Request to Merge Authors option. So this will mean that all of your names become linked with one author ID within Scopus. However, when you do a search, if you find your name and someone else's name has been merged together, you can click on that your author name and you'll see the next screen, and there's an option over on the right hand side to request author detail corrections. So if some other researcher has a similar name to you and your publications have been merged together, if you get in touch with Scopus, they'll be able to demerge your names and make sure that your publications are linked to your name specifically. And you'll see on the left hand side that it tells you what your author ID is, and it also again gives you citation information and H-index information. Not everyone will find that their publications are on Web of Science and Scopus because they're specific databases covering specific subject areas. However, if you can't find your publications on Scopus and Web of Science, you'll definitely find something on Google Scholar. But we would always recommend setting up your IDs in all of these databases so that you get the best information possible. If you want to set up your Google Scholar profile, then you'll need to create a Google account. Once you've created your Google account, you can log into Google Scholar and click on the My Citations option, which will then allow you to look at your citations and your profile. So this is my profile on Google Scholar. Obviously I haven't published very much, but you can see what it would look like for you. Again, you can edit your profile and you can manage this list and add any publications that are missing or delete any that aren't actually yours, but with someone with a similar name. And as long as you make your Google Scholar profile public, other people can very easily find your list of publications within Google Scholar. And again, you can see how many times you've been cited, your H-index, and other information. The fourth ID that we were going to talk about is one called ORCID. Now this isn't associated with any particular database, this is a standalone ID, which is there to link all of your other IDs together. Unfortunately, you can't just create one ID that will cover Google Scholar, Scopus, Web of Science automatically, because those are databases owned by different companies. Whereas ORCID isn't owned by any particular database company and is a work in progress which has new features being added all the time. ORCID is becoming quite a popular ID, and many publishers and certainly several funders now ask for an ORCID ID when you are publishing or when you are applying for grants. So it's quite important to get an ORCID ID, as this is likely to become more, to grow in future. More publishers and funders are likely to ask for your ORCID ID in future. Your ORCID ID deals with your publications, but you can also link other data to your ORCID ID. So if you've got open data sets, learning objects, software, multimedia, anything that you have created that you want to be available and in your ORCID profile, you can add if you want to. ORCID is really easy to set up. You simply go to the ORCID website and then follow the instructions on the home page in order to create your ORCID ID. And again, this is really easy to do if you're doing a funding application and you need an ORCID ID. Just go to the website, set it up, and as soon as you set it up, it will give you your ORCID ID number. So as you can see here in the top left, this is my ORCID ID number, and that's what I would put on any publication or funding paperwork where it asks for my ORCID ID. As you can see, publications come under the Works option at the bottom here, but you can also add information about your education, employment, funding, and as I say, any other kind of data or learning objects that you want to add to your ID. You can import or link your publications from Web of Science if you've already set up a researcher ID on Web of Science, and you can do the same for your author ID in Scopus. So you don't have to create everything from scratch in ORCID. You can go and create your ORCID account, link it to your Web of Science account, link it to your Scopus ID, and it will import your publications from those databases automatically. Unfortunately, there currently isn't any way to automatically import publications from Google Scholar. However, within Google Scholar, within your account, you can export your publication information as something called a BibTeX file. And you can then upload this file into ORCID and it will populate with all of your Google Scholar publications. You can also do the same thing if you're using reference management software like EndNote or RefWorks. So if you've been keeping track of your publications yourself, you can export from your reference management software as a BibTeX file and then automatically upload them into ORCID. You can also manually input data into ORCID if there's any publications that aren't on any of the databases that we've already mentioned. If you have any questions or need any help with setting up any of the researcher IDs that we've mentioned, please do get in touch with the Library Research Services team. You can email us on librarians@le.ac.uk, and we're happy to talk to you by email, by phone, or make a one-to-one appointment and help you set up your researcher IDs as required.